turkey.
Cold turkey. I think we're there. Cold
Do
turkey.
it live.
Do it live. Yeah. So the topic is epistemology with E Curt Allen, and I've listed your Substack.
Oh, thanks.
That's one of those fancy liberal words.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
That's one of those fancy liberal words. Epistemology. I have a pistol.
Yeah. Epistemology.
Well, most flowers have pistils too, though.
Yeah. So today we're having about 200,000 people down at the Capitol for our No Kings March. And Bruce Springsteen and Joan Baez are going to be there. God, I would like to see her. She's got to be in her 80s. 80s?
Yeah. But she's kind of the perfect person for one of those things.
Yeah, but you have to walk like 16 miles from where you park your car, and then you go to the Capitol, and then you'll be about 5 miles away from Bruce Springsteen and Joan Baez. So it's going to be interesting. The Republicans are up in arms in the state about it because they think it's childish.
Yeah, whenever you want to understand how little nuance conservatives really understand, mention the No Kings March, and you'll hear all the stupidest crap you've ever heard.
Yeah. Not quite getting it. Not quite getting what we're saying, that sort of thing. Anyway, okay. So what do I have? So kind of, I guess we'll just try to start with this topic and see what happens. And I'm gonna do it that way. Can you read the screens, Curt?
Yeah, I can read it fine.
Okay, you're not on a phone or anything. Okay.
No.
Okay, so so I think the most important thing is I'm doing a reduction, but I have a different relationship to reduction that a lot of philosophers do. And reduction to me is finding a simplified structure for something that does not replace everything. It's not an ontological reduction. It's just sort of a simplified structure. And then once you come up with that simplification, then you can start building back. And I call that the constructive phase, where you build back to whatever problem you're solving. So when I say that truth and propositions and all that are based on bacteria, on single-celled animals, I don't mean that is what truth is, what bacteria and single-celled animals do. What I'm saying is that we can learn a lot if we structure our thinking along a reductive, some reductive structure that captures the main point. So I do not treat reduction as flattening or dismissal. A reduction is an explanatory descent to the structural core of a phenomenon. It is not the full thing, it is a skeleton. The question is whether the skeleton is the right one. A good reduction should be spare without being empty. It should remain invariant as richer cases are built back onto it. When the meat is hung back on, the frame should still hold. This is why I do not think the mere fact that a reduced model fails to capture every complex case is automatically fatal. But it is fatal if the more complex cases reveal that the supposed core was never the real core to begin with. So that's kind of the point of it. Okay, so where the hell are we here? Is there an abstract? Yeah, so this is I've got three versions, three different voices for this paper, and this is the more academic one. And these are AI written. I haven't touched these yet, and I don't want to until I kind of get it right. So let's see here. So it's truth as biological commitment with probabilistic realism, organism, world, and the God question. So this does involve the God question. So anyway, paper argues that truth should be naturalized from below rather than defined from the top down. Truth begins in reduced form as a biological commitment, the structured, world-guided bearing of an organism toward action under conditions in which success or failure are possible. Knowledge begins as a fit to the world rather than as justified true belief. Proposition likewise begins earlier than language in a reduced biological form. Whenever an organism forms an action preparing response under the environmental constraint, it's forming a proposition. So human explicit propositions, logic, and science are later elaborations of this more primitive organism-world relationship. So like if my first model is like a single-celled animal that's in a pH gradient, and the pH gradient basically it goes through receptors on the cell wall, and they make some change inside of the bacteria or the organism, and that change becomes it's sort of the proposition, and that requires it to whip its flagella in one way or the other, right, one direction or the other, to either approach or recede from the gradient. And right there we have the polarity of truth and falsehood. So we already have some logic going on with organisms. And the other thing we have is we have action. So what I think I discovered for myself is that when we talk about epistemology, what we know and propositions and truth and all of that, we're always thinking about moving somehow, doing some action in the world, even if that action is just us thinking, because thinking is an internalized form of action. When you're thinking, you're actually doing something inside your brain.
I wouldn't even call it an internalized form of action. It is an action. You're overriding.
It is an action.
Overriding a bit is a thing.
Yep. Yeah. So that's kind of the beginning of propositions and. Well, at least you didn't scream. Most philosophers scream the first time I start talking about this, but I think it's because
I'm not a philosopher, so you're golden.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Yep.
Yeah,
let's see.
I'm Bones McCoy, right? I'm just a country doctor.
Okay. Well, I'm just a high school dropout, so I'm actually a miner by my first trade was a miner. A miner and a burglar, actually. A burglar by night, miner by day. So, so I don't have much. Those are my credentials. So this paper situates itself partly within the wake of Quine's naturalized epistemology. And Quine had a lot of detractors, and his retractors, from what I can gather, are kind of full of shit. They didn't really do a good job. But Quine had the idea that he was going to reduce it to psychology. So he was, he didn't have molecular biology and neuroscience background enough to get the reduction all the way down to a purely naturalized form. And he may have suffered a little bit from that, but he did a pretty damn good job with his naturalized epistemology. So, this isn't like I invented this. Quine invented this idea. So modern epistemology often begins too late. It begins with explicit propositions, reflected belief, justification, private experience, or the demand for certainty. Once those are treated as primitive, philosophy generates a familiar series of pseudo-crises. How propositions hook on to facts, how private appearances justify belief in an internal world, and how knowledge can survive the possibility of error. This paper rejects that order of explanation. So what do you think of that?
So where I generally talk about this is that I highlight the distinction between sessile life forms and mobile life forms, right? So a sponge is sessile. Sponges don't have neurons. They have not even real tissue types or cell differentiation, but they do have different functions available to even a differentiated cell. and there's certainly
Yep.
cell-to-cell communication, but there's no mobility, and therefore no need to like make a representation. And we can see that that's the case also for pretty much any sessile form, regardless of whether it's autotrophic or it's absorbing nutrients or it's chemotrophic. Like sessile generally means no
Plants.
energetic, nothing's going to be energetically devoted to representing the external world in some sort of like a schemata, right?
Yeah.
So there's still going to be responsivity to like conditions, but that responsivity won't be reflective or analytic. And then once you get mobility, even very simple forms of mobility like cnidarian larvae or things like that, and this is just within the eukarya, obviously, but that's a big subset of mobile organisms. Then you're going to see the differentiation into like sensing cell types, neurons, and various forms of those. And so once you get sensory cell types, then the cell becomes a primitive analytic agent, right? It can make simple logic circuits, and multiple cells can increase the affordances of that. But the reason that you need that is because you have to forage and avoid negative effects from your mobility.
Yeah.
So whether it's predation or foraging or finding a mate or whatever, like it needs to be done. If you're going to form a representation, then you'll need that representation to fit. So we're very, very similar here with a bottom-up epistemology. I just think that centering it on process and mobility makes more sense. And again, I make a big distinction between like standard existence, where there probably isn't any conscious analysis going on. Like I don't know if you're familiar with the like neurobiology of vision, but we have massive amounts of like pre-production processing before an image is presented for salience. And that's completely opaque to the organism. The organism has no idea how that happens. And yet it appears seamless, and it appears to present for salience lots of things. To us, and certainly probably all vertebrates, as far as we can tell, that similar process of vision is taking place. And in similar processes happening even with bat sonar or sonar in cetaceans. So here again, we have mobility, and we have neural circuits that are then creating schemata for analysis. And then the analysis happens after a bunch of opaque processes have taken place. And the reason for that is because you need massive gains in efficiency compared to what would happen if you had to analyze all the data. And so for me, like knowing is a process. It's not like these terms, truth, knowledge, proposition, these are all verbal convenience shorthands for what are fundamentally energy-driven processes that are constantly being updated and constantly being reevaluated, which is, that fits well with Klein's like rupture of the synthetic analytic distinction as well, right? Everything is always happening within, I don't know, are you familiar with Heidegger?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so he has the right. So the normal living is happening to Handenheit, and then when you do an actual like take apart a piece of ideas that you have and analyze them separately, then that's for Handenheit. And I think like the vast majority of biological organismal existence is to Handenheit, and then for Handenheit is reserved for those moments when there's a big mismatch between expectation and reality.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I've been trying to go a little bit further than that and look at basically single cells and what happens to them, and also looking at the evolutionary picture. But we'll get to that. But a single cell, basically, if something goes through a transmembrane receptor, it makes a change in that cell, and that is a very simple, very reduced form of knowing or sensing, right?
Hmm.
And it makes a change in the cell, and then that change goes through a chain of biochemical pathways and ends up producing possibly an action or some response to that change, that sort of thing. So I mean, it goes back
Yeah,
even further. Yeah,
I think I would push back on using knowing there, personally, because I think it's much more mechanistic.
yeah,
Um,
okay.
and there's not an opportunity for the single cell to challenge the response or
Yep.
process the response. It's just going to be mechanistically determined. So
Okay.
I don't know. I can see where you're coming from. In that it's certainly like, but you face to me a Socrates paradox here, like that there's a problem of the heap where you start to gain a certain number of affordances at some point between the single cell and the neural ganglion.
Yep.
Such that the question is like, when do we start to use different linguistics to describe the thing that's taking place in the clump of neurons that can't happen in the single neuron?
Okay. Yeah. So your criticism would be that I'm reducing too much. I'm starting too early.
Well, I just don't know that I would use the word knowledge there. Maybe if you want to call it proto knowledge or like.
Yeah, we call it proto knowledge. I don't have a problem with that. Part of the reason for that is I have kind of a greater biology project that has to do with oh, what the hell am I? Oh my God, developmental biology, how cells respond to the cells around them. Like every cell, in essence, an organism, and they respond both mechanically, physically. They respond with energy, and that's how. Basically, that's how embryology, that's how a organism forms. And then and you can also run another axis through evolution. You can go look at the ancestry of all the different, organisms that came up. And there's another line there basically. And I'm trying to model those things physically to the point where I could write a Python program to simulate some of them. And that's why I start very, very early, because this idea of how an embryo develops has to do with this amazing physical system, mechanical, chemomechanical system, and electrical that basically treats it. You could treat each cell like its own organism, and it exists in an entire environment, right?
No, I mean, that's certain, right? We know each cell is an organism because malignancy exists.
Yeah, right. And the other cells around it, its environment, impinge upon that cell, and they'll turn it into like a liver cell instead of a skin cell. And so that becomes a very rudimentary form of knowledge as fit to the world. This idea of knowledge as fit to the world might upset you a little bit, but I think if we call it proto knowledge or something like that, you might feel better about it.
I mean, it's just a process of dependent relationship would be the way that I would view it.
Okay. So
because the cell is responding to a bunch of gradients in exactly the way you're describing the single cells that are moving along a pH or a redox gradient, right? So I do struggle to refer to something mechanistic like that where it does not have an option to change its response to the input as knowledge.
Yeah, but it's responding to the outside world, and the outside world, not only the outside world, but the history of where it came from.
Yeah, absolutely.
It may end up being like a pluripotent cell instead of a multipotent cell or totipotent cell or whatever. So I mean, it's being changed as it goes, exactly as we're changed from the time we are zygotes and embryos and fetuses and little babies. And we have this world carving us, and that world carving is what I call the fit to the world or knowledge. And so that's my proto knowledge, basically, is that the world changes us.
I mean, it's just that each event slightly narrows the future possibilities for these.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's and it's definitely pushing back. I mean, sometimes literally with actin filaments and microtubules, the cell actually pushes on other cells, and those two together. I mean, it's kind of amazing. Embryology is probably the most pivotal biological phenomena I think that you can study. And anyway,
well, for like epistemology and stuff, to me, the developmental biology of like early childhood in humans, and then like imprinting and other forms of ethological developmental theories are very important to like understanding what it is that brains do when they like, have free access.
Exactly. Yeah, the way.
And so, I don't know if you're familiar with like Konrad Lorenz and Nico Tinbergen, but there's clearly going to be the possibility that an organism can have a predisposition to act on certain forms of external world's sense data, even if it has no prior knowledge. I think it was Lorenz who worked on seagull chicks. And all you would have to do is put anything down into the nest that had a red dot on it.
Yeah.
And as soon as they hatch, they would peck at the red dot, and they would attach psychologically to the thing that had the red dot, because the mother gull will have the red dot on her beak.
Yeah, those are those instinctual structural bits of knowledge, like a deer being able to stand up within a day or two and actually walk. And there's a whole bunch of other, built-in things that develop as the organism develops. But if you go all the way back to the zygote, you got to admit that single zygote cell doesn't do much and doesn't know much.
No.
By the time it's fully formed,
it couldn't walk. Have the ability to make a representation.
Yeah. I hate representationalism in the brain, by the way, but we can fight about that later. So you said Lawrence, and who was the other guy you mentioned?
Tinbergen.
Yeah. Okay. And he's a biologist?
They're ethologists, animal behaviorists.
Ethologists, okay. Cool. Okay. So this paragraph right here, my central claim is threefold. First, truth begins as biological commitment. Second, knowledge begins as a fit to the world, basically how the world changes that organism. Third, proposition begins in reduced form before language, wherever an organism forms a structured response to environmental input that sets up possible action. Human explicit propositions, formal logic, and scientific theorizing are later socially extended and technically refined achievements built upon the more primitive basis. So what I'm trying to do is look at things like the Gettier problem and the barn facade problem and stuff like that, and look at it with this structural core and try to make sense out of it, and ask some really dumb common sense questions. Are you familiar with the barn facade problem?
Yeah, I am. Okay. So again, my concern here is not anything that would be like critical of the structure you're putting up here. It's just that I tend to prefer adjectival and verb form descriptions of these processes, because like a truth is a snapshot, a piece of knowledge is a snapshot, and what we know about organismal behavior is that it does not ever stop or take a snapshot unless you're doing that sort of structural analysis that we talked about earlier. So imagine an outfielder who's catching a fly ball. He's going to track the position of the ball, track his position, and track like many other small factors that are going on in the context of the game, but he's never going to turn them into pieces of truth, pieces of knowledge, or propositions. They're all going to be a learned, skilled understanding that's taking place like all at once. And that processual behavior is what is the output. And yes, there's a schemata and there's representation, but a lot of that becomes, in the vernacular, it's going to be considered second nature to that particular thing. But I see it as like a learned conceptual framework, right? Whereby like the very best outfielders are doing things that are literally amazing for any organism to do. Like imagine they catch that ball and they're sending it to home plate on a single throw and it lands on home plate. What the hell? How does that happen? That is a phenomenal event. If it was some other organism, we would just be stunned, right?
Yeah.
But it's us, so we're like, oh yeah, that happens. And if you think about the kind of thing that has to go there, what we know is if he turns it to propositional knowledge, if he turns it into something he's analyzing, he's fucked.
Yeah.
It's never going to work.
Yeah, you learn that when you study martial.
I would love to see a chimpanzee throw a ball to home base.
Oh, there's no organism that can throw like we can. There just isn't.
What was I going to say? God, there's something I mean. There's also the phenomena, and this is not what I was going to say, but I'll get to it. The batter that hits the ball before he can see it because it's moving too fast.
Yep.
And
the batter literally cannot process the position of the ball and take an action based on the position of the ball neurologically. That's impossible.
Yeah.
They are always guessing.
Yep. Pretty interesting. Yeah. Okay. But that processual thing that enters into talks about consciousness, which we don't want to get into because that's opening up a can of worms. But this whole interactive process with our environment constantly, it takes a step, we take a step, it takes a step, we take a step. That whole thing is sort of in a broad brush is what we call consciousness. Basically, we're involved in that processual interplay, which is kind of important.
But the knowing of, the knowing how, and the knowing to in the position of the outfielder, those are all happening at the same time. Like there's no distinction being made there.
Right.
And that's really where my big criticism of much of like analytic philosophy's theories comes, is that they may be able to deal with one particular aspect of that event, but that event is a common event. That's like that's the kind of thing people do all the time. And yet analytic philosophy categories often can't really fully parse what's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing I wanted to say before is that when you study martial arts, you learn that you cannot be thinking. You're not going to be making, forming propositions and figuring things out. You learn to act in the moment. And I wanted to say hi to Deconverted Man, Robin Webster, Skyworks 6009. I looked at that video you provided from Ask Yourself, I think it was, and we're going to do something about that. And anyway, and Top Dog's here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
great to see you all.
Yeah. So I have the same criticism of this. Sometimes when you listen to philosophy, you just want to slap them when they come up with, well, what about this situation? What about that situation?
I don't know if you know my personal story, but my dad was a PhD philosopher. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, no.
I'm very familiar with that response.
Did he teach at a university or?
Yeah, he taught in California. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, wow. Did he write papers, books, anything?
He wrote some books, but nothing in philosophy that was major.
I didn't catch that. My earphones cut off.
He wrote some books, but nothing that was major in philosophy. It's nothing that advanced the discipline, no.
Yeah. I might own them. I don't know. I own some pretty arcane little philosophy books.
Okay, so he was a California philosophy teacher. Did he wear sandals to class and everything?
No, very, very
what kind
different.
of California philosopher was he?
fedora hat and a dickie under a sweater with a tweed jacket and suede patches on the elbows.
Not tweed. No, the patches.
And a philosopher's beard. So, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. My dad was a drunken miner.
Okay.
That's where I came from.
Yes, it could get very frustrating to have a conversation with him, especially when I got into my teenage years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, try having that conversation with a drunken miner.
Probably harder. You're right.
Yeah, it was a little harder.
Also make you want to slap him.
Yep. Okay, organisms are not trapped behind appearances. Okay, the position yields a form of probabilistic realism, and that's a little bit of AI stuff. I mean, I had hundreds of hours of conversations with AI to arrive at this, and I put it all together and just jammed it all into this. Organisms are not trapped behind appearances. They're already in the world, though always from a finite perspectival biological position. That's important. What we are determines what we our relationship to the world is reality to us. So when people talk about they make these criticisms against naive realism or realism, what they're forgetting is that they aren't fucking spirit entities. They're actual biological organisms in a relationship with the world, and the way you perceive the world depends a lot on how you are structured. And that kind of harkens back to Kant's transcendental idealism. And so that's kind of what that's about. Let's see. And then it goes after God here. The grip on reality is partial, corrigible, and often statistical, but it is genuine. So that doesn't make it unreal just because it is corrigible and statistical. Accordingly, the God to question is reframed. God is not needed as an epistemic guarantor of truth, logic, and knowledge. At most, God or some deeper ontological basis of reality would remain a further metaphysical question, not a prerequisite. And that's taking a shot at the presuppers. Yeah.
Sure. I that I will want to go with the presuppers as well, but I have to admit that the further I get on in years, the less I see any form of realism as doing anything that's non-linguistic. I am almost to the point where I think realism as a category is just a form of grammatical intensification.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The whole thing about what
I mean,
look at
the structure of English intensifiers. They almost always have as their base component something about truth or verity or anything like that. That's how we make intensifications in our language. Now, other languages that I know also work that way. So I think it might just be how minds say, no, it's genuine. It's like actual. It's real.
Yeah, this is really
it's just a
real
way of saying I feel this intensely.
Yeah.
And I are you familiar with Fritz Malfner at all?
No. Chris?
Oh. Fritz Malfner. He was a late 19th, early 20th century German philosopher whose ideas Wittgenstein does mention in the Tractatus. But he developed what was called Sprachkritik, where he really questioned the nature of many of these philosophical and theological categories on the basis of the history of the language that led up to the questions. Obviously, he was very anti-Hegelian, and everybody was sort of responding to Hegel in this time frame. But his position was that if we study where these words come from, we can see that underneath them, there's often very little. There's just a desire to put a certain suffix on another word and turn it into a thing.
Okay. Yeah, this whole introducing the word real is just problematic. I mean, there's a real with a capital R that we always try to attain. And I I call it sort of moving toward a God's eye view of things and trying to figure out how to do that. And what is real and what is not real tends to do a lot of work without ever looking at what the hell we're actually talking about and what the words mean. So, but I like your angle on that. I have to think about that some more and work on that.
Yeah,
Cool.
and again, we're doing epistemology. I don't want to get into ontology, but I just find it very interesting that there's a similar structure across many of these things. And the thought experiment I always use is, how is this different from 19th century vitalism in biology? Because what vitalism said was that, like, well, no, life is special. It has this thing in it that does this thing that we don't really fully understand. And then vitalism was never disproven. It's still theoretically like a live option, but there's just nobody working in the life sciences who holds to it, because it's been explanatorily reduced to nothingness.
So Scott, are you managing chat a little bit? I guess you are. Oh, is it Meltzner or Mothner?
Meltzner. I'm sure in German it's pronounced Mautner.
Okay, that's how Scott spelled it, right? Yeah, human knowledge is limited
spelling
by
it correctly.
Structure, imperfections. Okay, cool. Of language, words cannot capture reality with precision. Most philosophical problems, human knowledge. Somehow, Scott, your rise from linguistic confusion. Exactly. Yeah, and they said it's spinning their wheels, and that's why I'm trying to ground it in biology and start with this reductive approach, and at least be able to build from there and try to figure out, what is knowledge to me, and what happens when I think, reason, willfully act, and all that.
A great example of philosophical problems arising from linguistic confusion was watching Jim Bob and that guy Answer Me Now. And Jim Bob could not answer the question, what do you mean when you say proper whatever? I forget.
Oh, that one.
Yeah. And Jim Bob could not answer it. He just kept giving examples that were stupider and stupider, and never once defining what he meant by proper
stance
function.
Independent.
Stance proper function. Yeah.
Stance independent proper function. Yeah. Yeah, that's SIP. We were watching a video between Jim Bob and Ask Yourself, and Jim Bob was they were supposed to be talking about function in biology, like
no, I watched blood. That. Yep.
Okay. Yeah and Jim Bob didn't know, he was out of his element, but then Ask Yourself was a little bit kind of like I don't know. I think he interrupted too much, but anyway, that it was fun. It was really fun to watch that, because Jim Bob was kind of like, he basically got frustrated and quit because his precept thing wasn't working.
And then Eli took over.
Yeah. And then there were a few other people there that Eli and Steel something or another. What, Steelborn?
Yeah, Steelman.
Yeah. I was listening to his shit, and it's just like what was he saying? He was saying, the precept argument is it's not modus ponens or modus tollens or anything like that. Yeah. It's just a simple.
It's modus gaudens.
What's that?
Yeah. Modus gaudens.
Modus gauden, that's what you could call it. Yeah, that's a great one, because it was just God is the necessary precondition for knowledge. We have knowledge, therefore God. That's it. Right. It's like, wait a minute. That's one premise with the conclusion embedded in the premise, and it just doesn't make any sense. Modus gaudens.
But this gets direct. Like, I don't know if you saw my debate with Eli on this topic, but
no. Ooh,
I had a mega bloodbath with Eli Nix on divine knowledge, and my position, I was expecting a huge amount of pushback, because my position was that human knowledge is fallible, it's constantly updating, and it's based on a representation that simplifies rather than complicates, and therefore it's necessarily going to be an incomplete, the map is not the territory, that sort of thing. And I, contrasted that with omniscience, where you know every single thing, right? And I pointed out that without the ability to like background a piece of information or focus attention, you don't have knowledge, you have a database. And weirdly, right at the beginning, Eli agreed that divine knowledge was not like human knowledge. I just felt like, oh, okay, we're done. Right?
Yeah.
How can something be grounded in something that's not even definable as knowledge? But he kept going anyway, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, when you get into omniscience and divine knowledge, you're kind of getting into simulation theory. And in order to simulate the universe, you have to be the universe.
No, you have to be an order of magnitude more complicated than the universe, because you have to model everything, and the Landauer cost of that is massive, which of course they say, well, God's magic, he doesn't require energy. But that's like when you understand the physics rather than the metaphysics, it just becomes absurd.
Yeah. But then when you simulate something, sometimes it's a lot cheaper just to have the something and just record the data to memoize it, right?
Right.
Like memoizing a function. Yeah.
Like the amount of heat it would take to model just like a standard room in a house, all the particles and all the interactions would burn the room up.
It'd probably burn the solar system.
It would burn it up. There's so like there's 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd hydrogen atoms in a gram of hydrogen. And that's like a paperclip. So imagine you're trying to model like all the substance, all the air, all the other things in a standard room, and you have to be able to make predictions on the basis of what's going on. Like, no, that's going to create an incredible amount of heat.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, let's see.
So to your point here with Quine, like anything that you're going to have knowledge of is going to be at some level necessarily incomplete. And I don't think there's any serious position that can adopt an alternative position here in terms of like creaturely organismal knowledge, right?
Yep. I am missing some dialogue because of my screwed up Bluetooth headphones. So,
sorry.
Every now and then you cut out.
If you need anything, let me know.
Okay. That's a great example of how knowledge is incomplete.
Yeah,
my headphones not working.
you just modeled like signal to noise ratio for us.
Yeah.
There was a time where I would drive, across the states or whatever, and my radio would be bad, and I would literally only hear every other note of a song or something, and I would still play it that way because I could get enough. Even like with news or weather reports, I would get enough. It was good enough, even though I didn't hear it all very clearly. And,
well, your brain constructs it too. So
some people can't tolerate that. Like I would always be told if I was with somebody, turn off that damn radio. And it's just because tolerating the incompleteness of information is not something everybody can do. You either pretend it's complete and it's understandable, or you just shut it out,
Well, and part of that too, this gets to one of my positions, like the acquisition of this type of knowledge that you were able to do with that radio is a skill, right? It's a learnable thing. And there's a what it's like theoretically, if there is anything that is a what it's like to any of these things that we develop as skills, right? There's a what it's like to read Korean. So I just think that these are skill-based acquisitions that we gain, not some sort of primitive substrate.
Yeah. My ex-wife's always complaining that she's always saying, oh, you're hard of hearing. Never occurred to her that I just skillfully learned to shut her off. Just like, I know exactly how to filter that bitch. Anyway. Okay. Let's see. So we got Quine here. The mode remains Quinean in spirit, but it rejects extranatural foundations. It starts within the world disclosed by science. That's the other thing is I do this this reduction to space-time particles, or you could say space-time quantum fields. But if you get into that, it becomes a little dicier. But for the purposes of being a human at this macro scale, space-time particles, without dealing with relativity at all, seems to be how reality actually works at this scale, right? And you can do so much with space-time and particles. And that's how I find for universals being real things. And that, and there again, we use that word real. What do you mean by real? You know, are they floating out there and they have their own parking space? Not quite. You know, it's just that because of the necessity of space-time modeling, space-time particle modeling, there will always be multiple structures in any particular group of particles. Like in even in a random gas, you could find just probably millions of different geometrical forms in there.
Yeah,
Those
absolutely.
structures, and those structures are actually in there because we have this metric with space-time, right? And that metric, I mean, when we get into real physics, that metric may be something that we did not expect. Nevertheless, for our purposes as human organisms, we can learn a lot from just space-time particles. And I think I can support everything with that kind of naturalism, with that kind of basis. Everything that's important to us anyway. Oh, let's see what else we got here. Reduction first, construction second. So that's the
the only other little tiny thing, and again, this just gets to like I'm an old man and I'm a nitpicker now, but I would say that the world is not disclosed by science. The observed regularities of the world are being disclosed or are being disclosed by scientists.
Okay, yeah,
because I don't think there's such a thing as science, and I don't think that there's like a independent moment in which some like thing is disclosed and then it's just like done. It's just a process.
Yeah,
I think so.
That's called reification, isn't it? And it seems like our apologetics and presuppositional friends love to do that.
Oh my God, they can't understand the noun form of a verb. It's just a verbal convenience.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to get them to see that.
Yeah.
Yes, what you just said, you put it perfectly.
Oh, I was going to comment on it. I lost my train of thought. My train of thought went. As soon as I look at something, I lose my train of thought.
Robin, I have to like ache myself out of bed every morning. I feel like that's when you can call yourself old.
So, Curt, you are a medical doctor, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what do you think of the pit?
The Pit?
The Pit, yeah, that show, The Pit.
I never watch medical shows. I can't watch a medical show. I've never watched
really?
Them. No.
Oh,
they do one of two things. They bore me because I know what's going on, or they enrage me because they're wrong.
Because they're wrong.
They have no ability to make me interested.
Okay. The Pit seems to
for you. It's not philosophical, but since you're a medical professional, I'm going to ask it. What's the 3 things you wish most people or more people knew about their health or care of self or first aid or whatever that people don't seem to know?
Most important medical fact is that energy flow and energy variability is to a first degree vascular health, and so keeping your blood vessels healthy is probably the most important single factor in health. And not enough time and attention goes into getting people to understand that early enough in life. Like, we know that the major diseases of civilization are at least largely due to problems with vascular health. So that's thing 1. Thing 2 would be that disease categories are conveniences. They don't necessarily track reality. And people spend way too much time investing in conceptual diagnoses that are just statistical regularities. And then reification fallacy is a huge problem both for patients and physicians. And
Cool.
then the third thing would be that every piece of information should be held loosely. That the first thing to do when things are not working is to reassess everything.
Go back to the beginning, to the basics.
In other words, people get a diagnosis. They should just hold that as a tentative diagnosis and rethink it the moment things don't fit with that diagnosis being accurate. And that's like the biggest mistake that happens in medicine. Is like believing that someone once said you have this, and then therefore like interpreting everything else that ever happens in that framework and thinking it can't be wrong.
Yeah, that ship sailed for me on vascular health. I'm about 50% blocked in my lateral, what is it?
Yeah, it's still reversible at any age though. Like don't be a pessimist.
Well, I just run into a new
your ApoB around 40 to 45, and there's massive studies showing regression in many mammals.
I just got a new doctor, and he raised my statin dose and a few other things.
Good.
And he's
sounds
really
like he's
concerned about it.
Yep.
Yeah, the doctor I had before, he once told me, what did he say? I'm not going to treat you for heart disease until you have a heart attack. And I'm like,
that's horrific.
Yeah, that is horrific. He actually said that out loud.
It's literally like saying we're not going to put the forward collision sensor in your car until you have a crash.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Anyway, well, that's pretty cool. So I was going to ask you another question, but then I also lost that. I guess I'm getting tired. I'm no good in the afternoons. I'm really good in the mornings. You just talk to me at 4 in the morning. Scott does sometimes talk to me really early in the morning.
I had hours this morning, so.
No, correction. Sometimes Mike calls me very early in the morning. that kind of reveals more information in fewer words.
There you go.
Yep. Okay, so reduction first, reconstruction second. So I always talk about reduction is so misunderstood. Well, the dumbest form is when pre-suppers say, well, if your brain is just atoms, how can you have, how can you think about stuff? It's like, what? You've heard this, right? If your brain is just atoms, how can you have truth?
Sure.
Yeah, that sort of shit.
On my view, I don't have truth. I have some beliefs that might be true, but I don't have truth. Like there's no location of that. Andrew Wilson is always talking about how rights don't exist. Rights are just an abstract noun.
Yeah.
So if rights don't exist, neither do borders or truth.
Yeah. Their whole thing with rights not existing is they've got this weird masculine force thing that it's only because men allowed women to vote that they're voting. We could take away their right to vote at any moment. And it's like, you've heard that shit, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Jim Bob was going on about that on the stream yesterday, I think, too. Or yesterday or the day before.
No,
about the submissive and the masculine.
I was turned off when he was like being openly racist. I had to move on to something else.
Yep. Okay, so reduction and organisms in the real world. We're coming up on an hour, so we're probably not going to get through too much of this. But anyway, do you think I'm heading in the right direction here? I'm trying to.
Yeah, no. For me, it's always bottom up, right? The bottom up is the way to look at it, right?
Okay, and good.
From a developmental standpoint, we know that when an infant human is born, like it simply can't process the sense data that it gets. It doesn't have the ability. And it doesn't have conceptual categories that can allow it to process that for quite some time, right? You can play peekaboo with a baby who's 7 or 8 months old, and they're amazed when you show up. So they don't even have object permanence, and They like these are things that like I like to point out. Like, there's no way the presuppositionalist idea that we have this Wi-Fi setup where we're getting information from some ambient structure that brains can just access makes sense of the developmental biology that we have. What instead happens is each infant claws out an understanding of the world within a social matrix. And we also know what happens when they don't have experiences in a social matrix, through these horrific natural experiments where people have like deliberately deprived these children of the kinds of things they so desperately need, and the terrible outcomes that these kids suffer from failing to get that information in the proper time frame. Like, it's horrific, the outcomes, but what we see is that this must take place within a social matrix. It can't be clawed out independently.
Yeah.
I wonder what's happening to the kids put in the internment camps, that we have with ICE.
We don't have to wonder. It's terrible.
Yeah. Like the consequences is going to be, how many new sociopaths are we developing because we took them away from their parents and stuck them in the camps?
It's unconscionable. I don't have anything else to say about it. I honestly, I sort of just deliberately taken a couple of steps back from the whole thing because it just hits me too hard.
Yeah, it was pretty distressing to live in Minnesota a couple months ago.
Yeah, that was horrible.
That shit was happening right next door, and the guy that got shot that has a carry permit. I mean, I was going to the store with a carry permit, and that could have been me, just as easily. And it's like shit like that. It just hits home really hard. And our neighbors were very active in helping people, and those people lived within 5 blocks of me. People that were getting deported and roasted, and it's just horrible.
That's not like how I felt when my city had a mass shooting. Like, I was not far from it. That was not great.
Yep. Oh, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. That idea that knowledge is fit to the world. Basically, what I mean by that is historically, as you develop, basically from a zygote, the world keeps impinging on you and changing what your structure is. And when you look at neuroscience and how brains work, you ask where is the some thought or another. None of that makes any sense in neuroscience, basically, because it's kind of all over.
Yeah, I completely like that, but I would just use conformity instead of the word fit, because I really think, like, linguistically in the life sciences, we just need to move away from the word fit and fitness.
That word.
What we need to center on is like conformity to a niche and lineage persistence, because those words are much easier to understand for people who don't understand the biology of it, and they don't create confusion by implying an agent when there is no agent.
Yeah, I don't mean that kind of fitness.
You're talking about conformity to a niche, which is exactly what we need to center.
Well, it's like basically a rock in a stream eventually gets fit into that matrix of other boulders with it, right? And it's carved. Right. It's basically carved by the world. So the world is carving what we are.
Such a great metaphor, because that's energy flow under constraint, right? And that's exactly what's taking place in a living organism as well, just at a very different analytic scale.
Yep. Yeah, there's always this relationship of organism in the world, and when we pick out the organism and miss the world around it, we've totally lost the concept, or we've lost the thread. It's the same with consciousness. When you look at consciousness as being in the brain, it's not. It's in the body and the world around it at the same time, and we're this constant process, basically. Did you say
energy
you were
flow under constraint? Absolutely. So, I mean, this is the thought experiment that I always give people. Is like, imagine a city block, right? You have a city block. It's got all kinds of organisms in it and all kinds of things going on. Well, you just remove all the oxygen. Well, within minutes, most of that activity will all stop.
Yeah.
Right. And so you could argue, you can say at one level of analysis, all of that was just a manifestation of the oxygen field. And that's not an unreasonable level of analysis, right? But what we do is we just assume the continuity of the energy flow as a given when it's needn't be, right? Like we can easily travel several miles and be in a place where there's no oxygen at all.
Yeah.
And then we act as if all these categories that we generate under oxygen flow are somehow something that's not dependent in any way, when in fact they're obviously dependent.
Wow. Yeah, there'd be some heavy activity for a few minutes and then it would just die.
Yep. Just be gone within about 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's the enigma of death, watching somebody die. Like, what is left? It just, it happens within a few minutes. And the whole thing just stops moving, stops interacting and reacting. Anyway. Okay, so we're over an hour, and we're going to need a break. We're going to be on SNATA here pretty quick. And I go on here: truth before language, biological commitment. These are just the broad categories. Knowledge is fifth of the world. So this is where. So you suggest conformity.
I don't know if you mentioned this later. I don't know if you mentioned this later, but have you looked into Jerry Fodor, the philosopher's language of thought hypothesis?
Oh, that you mean with his criticism of natural selection?
No, that's a separate.
Oh,
that's a separate one of his positions. He argues that organisms have a language of thought, and that human languages are just a transformation of the language of thought.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Steven Pinker calls it mentalese.
Yep. That isn't too popular an idea.
Yeah, I know that it's not particularly popular, but I have specific
things
that take place that I think don't make sense unless it's accurate.
Okay.
But that's not like an epistemology thing.
Yeah. Well, language and action are so tightly related. Like, if you look at the motor cortex, right, and then the premotor cortex, cortex being exapted, like there's one theory of what thought is, and that it is an exaptation of premotor planning, movement planning. And then it goes toward the frontal cortex, and we ended up with a few more loops, primates in our frontal cortex. And they took that to another level. So basically it's a premotor cortex where thinking happens. And when you look at how, what's really cool, and especially when you're thinking about free will, is when you look at the interaction basically of the cortex and the thalamus and the what the hell is it? Basal ganglia, the whole setup in the basal ganglia. There's an action selection mechanism and sort of a stepping mechanism. So there's a way to step through things, basically.
Yeah, that's correct.
And when you're thinking, that's what you're doing. And that action selection thing is like a statistical thing, where if you run into a situation where where you don't know which way to go exactly, it just, some random noisy event will pick an action. And that all happens in the basal ganglia, which is really cool. And you start realizing, go ahead.
Yeah, the language is built on a deep vertebrate structure that is not that qualitatively different in humans. I don't know if you're familiar with the work being done out of Japan on birdsong, but one researcher there, I think his name is Takahashi, has determined that there's definitely syntactic symbolic communication going on in just a simple Japanese songbird. So that the sequence of calls absolutely matters to the meaning, and birds respond differently depending on the sequence.
Yeah.
So they definitely have syntax. And there's also, I think, work that's been done in bonobos that show that they have syntax. So I just see human communication as human syntax is to regular vertebrate syntax what an elephant's trunk is to noses, right? It's capable of doing way more stuff, but at bottom it's contiguous, like biologically and evolutionarily, with like much more basic structures that are present in many, many different creatures.
Are you familiar with Dr. Chris Thompson? He's been on the channel occasionally. No,
I'm not. I probably have to look it up.
He's a neuroscientist. He's got a is that the name of his YouTube channel, Scott?
Yeah, Dr. Chris Thompson.
Yeah, he does creationism critiques and stuff, but one of his specialties is bird songs and neuroscience.
Great.
He's a neuroscientist, and he knows quite a bit about that. He also gets into mercury and the effect of mercury in the environment. So those two things are his passion.
Horrible.
But he's got a lot of good creationist takedown videos and stuff.
Nice.
Neat guy to know. You should
Sounds
know
good.
him. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know what the hell else I got. So your response to motor preparation and tension, we were kind of talking about that against the inner theater picture. I don't like representationalism. I like processual interaction with the world. Like what?
Yeah, I think if I'm going to use representationalism, it's going to be within a schemata, but not necessarily within a actual like visual or physical structure.
Yep.
And the reason is because there are people with aphantasia, so obviously they're perfectly normal and functional even with aphantasia. So it couldn't be a visual schemata.
Yep. And then my recovering and rebuilding naive realism and going back to a common sense. Like with philosophy, I always ask myself, what's happening right here, right now, with me, in my room, in my life, basically. And I think some philosophical discussions seem to forget that, that they're human beings, or human organisms talking to each other. And so that's kind of what I'm doing there. Human truth as socially extended biological commitment. Logic is a late achievement. Reframing the God and then the great conclusion or whatever. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, I think
that's what I got so far. But
very close
I've got to
to my.
rewrite this.
It's very close to my understanding.
Okay, I'll send you this one. This is this actually has 3 different drafts of the paper. One of them was in my voice, which is, like a minor burglar, high school dropout voice, sort of, a little bit different. And then an academic voice, and then the other one was, I don't know, somewhere in between. But anyway, I got all 3 in a PDF. I could drop that on you. But anyway, this project I think is important because there are some things that I would like when atheists get into conversations with these fucking preceptors. I think sometimes we ought to do better. Do you agree with that? Do you think sometimes we really fuck up?
Well, remember that Bonson's position wasn't that precept was like logically airtight, but that it was a way to get a conversation on your terms. And I just think that's still the case, right? They don't.
It is, yeah.
They don't have a desire to actually convince you. They have a desire to browbeat you.
Yeah, it's a bro thing. Yeah. Yep.
And again, I'll ask them the question: 2 people both have a true belief. One is grounded, one is not. How do they interact with the world differently? And they can never give me any answer. Well, actually, that's not true. A couple of nights ago, some preceptor got on Taco's channel and said, well, anybody whose beliefs aren't grounded, their beliefs are false, which I found fascinating. But she ended up backing off on it because, of course, it means that Aristotle's beliefs were all false.
Yeah. So on your Substack, you did that thing about, that it's basically a bro game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's really important to consider. I mean, all they care about is, I just wiped, I wiped the room with them. It's just like, it's just so fucking macho and stupid and juvenile. Very adolescent, I think, some of the precept conversations. Anyway.
Well, and again, people like
Anyway,
swagger, right? So there's a lot of swagger associated with it, and my opinion is that a lot of these belief systems, whether they're theistic or not, they propagate not by convincing people, but by creating an affinity fixation for a charismatic figure.
yeah. And that's the fucking thing that's driving a lot of what they're thinking. What kills me is the amount of views these preceptors get and Orthodox bros get.
Yeah.
I mean, they're obvious, and I think that's why we have the political climate we have right now. This bro thing is kind of like dry. I mean, it's hitting a spot in people that's resonating with them.
Do you remember when those right wingers were discovered to have taken huge amounts of money from Russia to like promote the Russian position on the war?
Yeah.
Do you really think that the Russian Orthodox Church isn't doing the same thing?
Yeah. It's having an influence, a hell of an influence.
I mean, there's got to be some reason why there's all this online orthodoxy propaganda.
Right. And orthodoxy is suddenly a thing in the United States, and I don't think it was 10 years ago.
Well, it's definitely a thing online. I'm not sure. Like the numbers are still well below 1%. So.
Well, it's easy to be Christian or at least speak Christian stuff and not really know the Bible or care about the Bible or Jesus or ethics.
They never want to talk about the Bible, the preceptors.
Yeah, it's just this is what the church says. It's an authoritarian projection.
And in an apostolic tradition faith, you don't even need to know the tradition. You can just say, I follow the tradition, and I don't even understand it because I can go to the liturgy and get my henosis and theosis there. So,
yeah. Okay, guys, let's wrap it up.
That was great. Thanks for having me.
Kurt, it's always a joy to have a discussion with you.
Stick around for a minute backstream. So I'm going to end the stream, and we're going to be back in 45 minutes with Snada on Dave's channel. And I don't think I'm going to pair it today, but that's only because I'm really fucking lazy. Anyway, okay, goodbye, crew world. We're ending.
Thank you, everybody.